get started now. Let me undo this song. Hold on a second. And it looks like the cat wants inside a room. So hold on. Maybe not. Okay. All right. All right, let's get started, everybody. Now, the best thing to do, if people have questions, write down the questions you might have, and then come up and we can go over it, hopefully, because the more engagement I get, the more people ask questions, the more we can be more engaging and understanding what we learn. If we combine our things of what we have questions on to what we understand, it could help each other. The more interaction I get, the better I have people doing this, but we'll see what happens. Doodly, come up when you're ready, if you are. All right, so let's get started. We're gonna start with 6, which is the point of departure, or in any case, you missed it. That's what it's called. And we're going to go over what Huey P. Newton said first. There are 2 kinds of nationalism: revolutionary nationalism and reactionary nationalism. Revolutionary nationalism is first dependent upon a people's revolution, with the end goal being the people in power. Therefore, to be a revolutionary nationalist, Therefore, to be a revolutionary nationalist, you would, by necessity, have to be a socialist. If you are a reactionary nationalist, you are not a socialist, and your goal is to the oppression of the people. Of course. First appeal, everybody. Here we go. All right. Now we go into Comrade Mao Zedong. The fundamental contradiction in the process of development of a thing, and the essence of the process determined by this fundamental contradiction, will not disappear until the process is completed. But in a lengthy process, the conditions usually differ at each stage. The reason is that although the nature of the fundamental contradiction is the process of development of a thing, and the essence of the process remain unchanged, the fundamental contradiction becomes more and more intensified as it passes from one stage to another in the lengthy process. In addition, among the numerous major and minor contradictions which are determined or influenced by the fundamental contradiction, some become intensified, some are temporarily and partially resolved or mitigated, and some new ones emerge. Hence, the process is marked by stages. If people do not pay attention to the stages in the process of development of a thing, they cannot deal with its contradictions properly. Mao Zedong. In part 3, I wrote, we need to critically study everything ever written on the origins of the word and concept nation, and on the evolution of nationalism. While engaging in this study, we must avoid the quagmire of both bourgeoisie and doctrinaire or vulgar materialist, Marxist interpretations. Like race and class, the word and concept nation has also been socially constructed by peoples as they've made their own history, one defined from the perspective of their own needs and interests. Nation exists in the world prior to their appearance in Europe. We must come to distinguish modern from pre-modern, capitalist from pre-capitalist nations, sovereign from oppressed nations. And just as there is pro-capitalist bourgeoisie nationalism, there is also a pro-socialist revolutionary nationalism, whereby people shape a new nationality in the implicable struggle against which opposes socialism to capitalism. We need to discuss what a nation is so that we can get a better understanding of what we fight for and how to conduct the fight. This discussion is especially necessary for those who, 1, think that they can fight for socialism without engaging in national realities, and those who, 2, think that a nation is the same as race, or the black liberation and national liberation are the same. We need to discuss Fanon's idea of the nation, and those ideas of the nation held by the radical or rev wing of the bourgeois nationalist forces. Even if to simply understand his use throughout Wretched in such terms as national characters, nationalism, national consciousness, and nationality, so that we come to understand that he and why he makes the fundamental distinctions between bourgeoisie and reactionary nationalism and revolutionary socialist nationalism. Fanon distinguishes bourgeoisie nationalism from national consciousness, while also showing that nationalism and national consciousness are both necessary, but that neither alone is sufficient to acquire general liberation, social revolution, and that bourgeois nationalism can lead the people to blind alleys. No matter the contemporary term, we are still engaged in a fight over the fate of nations, a fight to build new nations and new types of nations. Okay. As with part 3, I feel the need to open with a reminder. These meditations are not merely about the thought of Fanon, as it particularly expressed in Wretched. These reflections are also address those of use who are concerned about how we got here and why we got here as we did. These reflections are also about where we must go and what we must begin to do if we hope to get there. These meditations are made with the hope that by accident and by design, they will become part of the process of winning the war now being fought within what's now known as the U.S. and throughout the world, to end all forms of oppression and exploitation of the peoples and to build socialism. These reflections are offered to inspire critical thought and to engender revolutionary, i.e. socialist practice. It's my hope that they will be useful to you, no matter who you are, no matter the front that you struggle on, or the issues around which you base your activities and your thought. All right. Oh, I should have read that sooner. All right. Here we go. Big, huge one. So we can observe the process whereby the rupture occurs between illegal and legal tendencies in the party. The illegal minority is made to feel that they are undesirable. And are shunned by the people that matter. The legal members of their party come to their aid with great precaution, but already there is a rift between the two tendencies. The illegalists, therefore, will get in touch with the intellectual elements whose attitudes they are able to understand a few years back, and an underground party, an offshoot of the legal party, will be the result of this meeting. But the repression of these wayward elements intensify as the legal party draws nearer to colonialism and attempts to modify it from the inside. The illegal minority thus finds itself in a historical blind alley, boycotted by the towns. These men first settled in the outskirts of the suburbs, but the police network traps them and forces them to leave the towns for good and to quit the scene of political action. They fall back towards the countryside and the mountains, towards the peasant people. From the beginning, the peasantry closes in around them and protects them from being pursued by the police. The militant nationalist who decides to throw in his lot with the country people instead of playing at hide and seek with the police in urban centers will lose nothing. The peasant's cloak will wrap him around with the gentleness and the firmness that he never suspected. These men who are in fact exiled to the backwoods, who are cut off from the urban background against which they had defined their ideas of the nation and of the political fight. These men have in fact become Malquestner guerrillas, since they are obliged to move about the whole time in order to escape from the police, often at night, so as not to attract attention. They will have good reasons to wander through their country and get to know it. The cafes are forgotten. So are the arguments about the next election, or the spitefulness of some policemen or others. Their ears hear the true voice of the country, and their eyes take in the great and infinite poverty of their people. They realize a precarious, precious time that has been wasted in unless commentaries upon the useless commentaries upon the colonial regime. They finally come to understand that the changeover will not be reformed, nor a battering of things. They come to understand with a sort of bewilderment that will from henceforth never quite leave them. The political actions in towns will always be powerless to modify or overthrow the colonial regime. These men get used to talking to the peasants. They discover that the mass of the country people have never ceased to think of the problems that their liberation accept in terms of violence, in terms of taking back the land from the foreigners, in terms of national struggle, of insurrection. It is all very simple. Let's make sure. I'm moving on to the next page. I'm going to talk about the nation here, but probably not as you might expect. I'm going to use the words that you're familiar with, but they'll be given a twist, invested with slightly new meanings. I'm going to give some initial shape to what, for most of us, will be a new concept of nation, while also pointing towards new paths and motions for revolutionary nationalists, i.e. socialists, thought and practice. I must say that I feel these days confident that these seeds will inspire great imagination and initiative within those of us who truly want to serve the people and to help clear the way for a better world. If not for ourselves, then surely for those who come behind us. Why talk about nation? Because it's real. Nations are real. It amazes me how easily those who rant and rave against all talks of nations and nationalism, revolutionary, manage to overlook the fact that they are, in some sense, nationalists themselves. By that I mean that they are nationalists because they seek a new unity grounded in shared interest. The nation is before and after all else a new unity. Let me repeat that. The nation, a nation, is before and after everything else. One might say about it, a, quote, new unity. Similarly, I'm going to talk about the state, but again, with a twist. New meanings. We stand against an apparatus that would stand separate from and above the people and used to suppress the people's unhindered exercise of their social, very broadly speaking, powers. Maybe we'll come up with a new name for the apparatus that we need, but need one. We do. We need a people's socialist state apparatus, not a bourgeois class authoritarian state apparatus. Now, why talk about Fanon's ideas about the nation? Why do so while meditating on Wretched? Surely not many people would open their comment on Wretched by saying that it's about revolutionary nationalism, or that it is about the pitfalls of narrow cultural nationalism. These days, I think an analogous term may be certain forms of postmodernism or post-structuralism, or maybe even post-colonialism. Need to assert remarks on why Reed is in quotes, i.e. refers to post-structuralist interpretations especially in lit, etc. In our reading of Wretched, the first time around most of us didn't get it. Yes. Isn't there a line in Spike Lee's Bamboozled where a would-be racial says, quote, radical says, quote, "You better be glad that I ain't reading Wretched yet." What does that really mean? What can we draw from it after we get all between and underneath it? Maybe we could begin by saying, there are those among us who are glad that so few of us have read Wretched. Even a mere reading will produce a significant change in your thought and behavior. There are those among us who are euphoric because so few of us have studied Wretched and thus have not obtained from it that which would inspire new forms of thought and practice, aided by insights and guidance providing to us throughout its pages. It would enable us to see through most of all, hopefully, of the BS that passes as progressive thought these days. It occurred to me as I reflect upon the lines, "You'd better be glad that I ain't reading Wretched yet," that pseudo-bourgeoisie and petty bourgeois forces in our midst tremble in fear at the thought of untold millions even merely reading Wretched, because these millions would discover that the book is an indictment of the intellectual production practice of so many who now fiend as public intellectuals, leaders, and spokespersons. I mean, Wretched is about how the people as a whole explain that what this means must lead and conduct the struggle to build a new type of nation and a new type of state, a people state. We may call it. The book warns us not to let the bourgeoisie forces take power during and after the struggle to liberate, build the nation, and acquire a formal independence. Check it. You think Fanon was addressing himself only to the peoples of the African continent? Peoples everywhere outside of the US? The truth is, though, he was also addressing himself to you, as you struggle here against both the external imperialist powers, the US government and capitalist state, and against the internal bourgeois forces and of our own oppressed nation, forces aligned with the imperialist powers, and who sought to become a new ruling class within the post-neocolonialist apparatus that was emerging even as early as the late 1960s. Hello, Dooley. The whole postmodern, post-structural movement among the bourgeoisie forces was meant to prevent the people as a whole from developing and pursuing revolutionary socialist and anti-capitalist objectives. The crowd of bourgeoisie nationalists that came to adopt the line that nationalism is dead, this too must be explained. They did so only to prevent you from adopting revolutionary nationalism. When they began to push the line on, quote, the need to recognize the diversity within the African American community that was designed to get you to accept the existence of the so-called leadership of the bourgeois forces as legitimate. So they're talking about comprador classes of the black community that wants to keep, those are the bourgeois forces. So he's talking specifically about the black people's experience. So I say again, we all missed it. And because we didn't truly know where we are, nor do we know how we got here and why. How many times must I repeat? How many times must it be repeated? The last truly revolutionary thrust was exhausted in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The Rev failed. The Rev also was defeated. The revolution failed, and the revolution was defeated. There has been no revolutionary movement within the U.S. for nearly 35 years. 35 years, bourgeoisie forces of the oppressed and the oppressor nations are, quote, in power and secure, as George Jackson would say. You've been bamboozled. You've been hoodwinked. You've got so-called spokespersons who speak only for themselves, talking over, under, and all around you by addressing themselves to their masters, though they like to think of themselves as partners in the process. You've got so-called leaders who are in fact misleading you, dulling your senses. What? Misleading you, dulling your senses, rather than helping to awaken you, to inspire and to assist you in the attack upon the contemporary manifestations of the forms of your oppression and exploitation. This is nothing but capitalism and imperialism reformed. You've even got so-called heroes that are nothing more than criminals, i.e. Michael Jordan, who robs you every time you buy a pair of his shoes, while he also signs off on exploitation of the people who make the shoes. We won't get there until we see that Michael Jordan and those like him are criminals. They're partners in the exploitation of peoples here and abroad. We're criminals, and so are you. They're criminals, and so are you. So again, in our mere reading of Wretched, the time around most of us didn't get it. The problem now is that we think that we did. Even then, there's so much proof that we didn't. A proof that is pervasive, that is smothering us, blinding us, and making us defeat and unintelligent. To check it out, Fanon opens the book by talking rather straightforwardly about the restoration of nationhood to the people. And the final paragraph of the body of the book, he ends with a reminder that it is a revolutionary nationalism that must be sought. Independence is not a word which can be used in the eroticism, right?
Exorcism.
So I had it right. Exorcism, but the indispensable condition for the existence of men and women who are truly liberated. In other words, who are truly masters of all the material means which make possible the radical transformation of society. And what else did he say? The living expression of the nation is the moving consciousness of the whole of the people. It is the coherent, enlightening action of men and women. The national government, if it wants to be national, i.e. revolutionary, ought the government by the people and for the people, for the outcast and by the outcast. We need to study and to discuss Fanon's idea about nation and revolutionary nationalism, because he had things to say which remain relevant to us, to the issue that we confront, and to the objectives that we pursue. Fanon and Wretched are relevant to our concerns over our next paycheck or lack thereof, relevant to our concerns over our health care or lack thereof, and to every other concrete issues that touches our life. Fanon says things in the book about the narrow nationalist that can help you to change the political relations of your neighborhood, where today the petty bourgeois, politicians, and business people are calling shots that are not in your interest, and only hope that I can string together the words that will make all of this and more clear to you, clear enough that you'll begin to think differently and to act differently, to think differently about yourself, your so-called leaders, and about your ability to become a leader, i.e. a fully responsible citizen of your nation, no matter what it is called. How does the song go? It's winter in America and no one knows what to save. Well, it's still winter inside U.S. borders and throughout the world, and too few of us seem to know what to save, i.e. what to fight for. and we have no sense of how to conduct the fight under present conditions, i.e. IG. We've got gadgets and we think we've got more money, etc. And that things are better. But we ain't looking for the whole picture, looking at the whole picture, and we ain't making a comparative analysis. The master still lives in the big house, and we still live in shacks. But both of the big house and the shacks are simply more modern, and the wealth that's been stolen from the people throughout the world has trickled down a bit to even the slaves. And our problem is that we need to develop an awareness and a consciousness about this. It's frighteningly common to hear people exclaim their confusion while often justifying their lack of greater initiative by pointing to the bewilderment and lack of political activity that surrounds them. People admit their confusion, yet don't know why they are confused. They confess their ignorance, even though they read profusely. The media favored intellectuals. It would seem that there'd be less confusion if the authors were reading where really doing what we assume they are doing too. Oh my gosh. Second one. What does it say? Analyzing Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, the revolutionary nationalism. We need revolutionary orientation, but few, if any, of the favored authors are really revolutionaries. Who among them stand to the left of Fanon? People today remain confused because, in large part, those they read have led them astray, led them up blind alleys. Few of these authors even invoke Fanon's name and work or critique it in any depth and breadth because it ain't easy to assimilate Fanon and Wretched into a bourgeois abet, or to turn Fanon into a friend or a mouthpiece of the bourgeois forces. We become confused in part because even back in the day, we didn't know what to fight for. Some of us, at one point or another, thought that the fight was for civil rights. And when we were told that the civil rights movement had run its course, we believed that the real fight was over. Yet we weren't quite comfortable with the lack of freedom that we know still exists. The struggle has always been about for more than mere civil rights, and that movement simply marks one stage. See Mao's quote above. In the long process of resolving the fundamental contradictions between ourselves and the capitalist American imperialism. Some of us thought that we were fighting for black power, which was to manifest itself through electoral participation within the boundaries of bourgeois hegemony. We thought black power would take the form of vaguely defined community control, or equality, or parity, or pluralism. Also to be exercised within the bounds of capitalist hegemony. So when we were told that the Black Power movement had matured and turned green, we again can't understand why we didn't feel like, quote, full citizens, sharing and exercising real power in U.S. society. Then too, many of us thought we were fighting for a black skin liberation. And as we continued that struggle today, we can't understand why even the struggle itself remains so elusive and amorphous, and why it is so hard to unite the people around the slogan that are based on narrow nationalism. As the 1960s came to a close, we entered the first few years of the 1970s, becoming more and more frustrated and disoriented as the revolutionary thrust was defeated through the combination of the weakness of the revolutionary forces, the struggle for power and leadership over the people that was waged by the internal bourgeois forces and the external attacks by the oppressive state. We've lost our momentum. The continuity was broken, and the revolutionary forces lost or abandoned their ties to the people. A low tie was the result. So now the question is, what to do after revolutionary has failed? Here's what George Jackson says. You're welcome to come up, Doodle, if you want. After revolution has failed, all questions must be centered on how a new revolutionary consciousness can be mobilized around new set of class antagonisms that have been created by the authoritarian regime of terror. That at which level of social, political, and economic life should we begin our new attack? George Jackson, of course. There has to be a raising of questions and a search for answers and for new inspirations and guidance. Although too many of us think otherwise, part of the reason for the lack of greater revolutionary momentum at the present time is that we haven't raised enough questions, or we've been raising the wrong questions. We haven't sufficiently uncovered the lessons to be drawn from previous experiences and not brought that knowledge to bear upon the present and the problems that we confront as we head into the future. Relatedly, we've failed to maintain our grasp upon and failed to continue to develop the tools that we are beginning to use during the revolutionary thrust that failed, thinking that our path had been wrong rather than our way of walking it. We felt that we had to abandon old sources of insight and guidance, to abandon old schools of thought. We were told that we had to become postmoderns and post-structuralists, and we didn't know, and still don't, the inherent dangers of these with their bourgeoisie orientation. We accepted the lies, even as we told ourselves that they didn't, that history had come to an end, that the struggle of socialism was dead, and that revolutionary movements would never rise again. Of course there will be a next wave, but the question is, will it be determined by spontaneity or by consciousness? The new theoretical and ideological offensive launched by the capitalist state and carried out by its intellectual agents and the petty bourgeois forces in our midst contributed to our forgetting what we were, what we are fighting for. We fight today for the same thing we fought for, as Fanon wrote in Wretched of the Earth. We engage the same foes that we engaged then too, despite what our enemies have told us, and despite what many of us now believe. We haven't yet reached the end of the social collective subject. The contradictions between capitalism and socialism is still fundamental in all national societies. Contradiction between imperialism, capitalism as a world dominant system, the revolutionary nationalism, i.e. national revolution that aimed to delink from the world's dominating capitalist system and to build socialist societies. It is still fundamental in the world. This is why we need to be reminded. It's what you need to be reminded of. We're still engaged in the same process. It simply reached a different stage. And we witness the experience changed forms of the major and minor contradictions that determine the influence by the fundamental contradiction. In fact, the fundamental contradiction itself appears to be new only because of the changes undergo as it passed from one previous stage to its present one, while its essence has remained the same. I open with the words from Huey and Mao. Huey words are used to set the foundation for the theme, which argues that Fanon is a prototypical revolutionary nationalist, and that Wretched is the manifesto that helps to shape our still developing understanding of revolutionary nationalism. It was part of Huey's genius that allowed him to make the distinction between revolutionary nationalism and bourgeoisie nationalism. After reading Wretched, a distinction uncommonly made at the time and still seldom made IG by those who condemn all nationalism as reactionary or those who perceive all nationalism as revolutionary. Work in quotes by Bobby Seals and Eldridge. Throughout, although we may re-articulate some of the concepts shaping it or identify it with the use of other terms, revolutionary nationalism remains the objective for most of the world's people. For emphasis, revolutionary nationalism is where the nation, a new unity among the politically organized groups of people, carry out a nationalist revolution against capitalism and to build socialism. Revolutionary nationalism is not only, though, anti-capitalist, it is also anti-patriarchal, and it abhors all forms of gender oppression. In Wretched, Fanon took aim at the fundamental contradictions in the world that between imperialist oppression and the struggle for national liberation. Put another way, Fanon took aim at the contradictions between capitalism and the struggle for the development of socialist societies. Wretched is about the struggle to shape new socialist nations, to shape a new type of nationalism in the still bourgeois-dominated era. Wretched links cultural to the process of making history as new socialist nations. It links national consciousness to socialist consciousness via the revolutionary character of nationalist struggles in the era dominated by imperialism. Sartre echoes Fanon, quote, "In order to triumph, the national revolution must be socialist. If its career is cut short, if the native bourgeoisie takes over power, the new state, in spite of its formal sovereignty, remains in the hands of the imperialists." Later, Sartre reminds us that Fanon had urged the peoples of Africa, Asia, and Latin America to achieve revolutionary socialism all together, everywhere, or else one by one. We will be defeated by our former masters. Yeah, clearly, we need a new international international for the 21st century and beyond. National liberation means that people struggles for the independence to choose the content and direction of their socio-economic lives, i.e. to choose to move along the capitalist or the socialist path. The struggle for socialism can only occur within boundaries marking out new people's democratic nations and states. Put another way, everything is connected, and everything is about making a choice between capitalism and socialism. At this point, even the worldwide struggle to arrest and eliminate the AIDS epidemic is linked to the struggle against capitalism and the struggle for socialism. Environmental justice is underthinkable outside the context of a struggle, but to build socialist societies worldwide. Whatever the issue, whatever the struggle, it's linked to the choice between capitalism and socialism. No surprise then that oppressed peoples the world over took so fervently to Wretched, and like those of us within U.S. borders in the late 1960s, IG, the Black Panther Party, everyone understood that one of Fanon's prime targets was the pseudo and petty bourgeois forces in our midst. No surprise either that the Wretched remains so relevant to the combat of the contemporary forms of post-colonial oppression, i.e. neocolonialism and post-colonialism. If I had the time or the inclination, I could argue that Lenin could also stand as an example of revolutionary nationalists. Similar arguments could be made with the regards of Mao, Ho Chi Minh, Fidel, and a number of others who aren't normally considered in that light. As I reflect on it a bit, maybe I'd best cast Lenin as one who planted the theoretical seed of revolutionary nationalism, i.g. imperialism means that capital has outgrown the framework of national states. It means that national oppression has been extended and heightened in a new historical foundation. We must link the revolutionary struggle or socialism with the revolutionary program on the national question. Lenin didn't say that national states, i.e. nations or nationalism, were no longer relevant. He didn't say that national oppression, i.e. nationalism, had to be subordinate to the struggle for socialism. He said that the oppression of nations in the era of imperialism had been extended and heightened on the foundation of that increased its relevance and importance to the struggle for socialism. He said that the struggle for national liberation, revolution, and socialism had now to be linked, as also says Fanon. As also said Mao, when he posed that anti-colonial struggles were applied internationalism, and that therefore there was no contradiction antagonistic between patriotism, nationalism, and communism. In the era of imperialism, all anti-colonial wars are revolutions against international capital, and they are part of the proletarian socialist world revolution. That was Mao Zedong. We should also recall the flack that Ho Chi Minh caught, especially from so-called orthodox Marxists who indoctrinate communists, as he was labeled a nationalist. Folks couldn't understand how he could be a revolutionary nationalist and a communist. These are people who understand neither revolutionary nationalism nor communism. To use words from Mao, as I open to remind us that Wretched repeatedly warns us to pay attention to the stages of the process of development, of the struggles to carry out the socialist revolution in nations dominated by capitalist imperialism. Wretched foretold the consequences that would result in the revolution failed, i.e. should the people not block the rise to power of the bourgeois nationalist forces, i.e. the rise to power of the new black middle class. In the US, after our revolutionary thrust failed, same book, different pages. In 2003, different terms used to describe or mask the same process. Wretched continues to offer us insights. Oh my gosh, I gotta appeal again. There you go. Who's in the kingdom? No one is. Okay. Wretched continues to offer us insights and guidance if we open ourselves to it. As we enter the middle of the first decade of the new century, it offers us perceptions and directions as we engage the forces of globalization and still imperialism in the new form at a new stage, which wages war upon the people of Iraq, threatens the people of Iran and North Korea, assist in the G-side of the Palestinian people, and ravages the lands of the people of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Wretched remains relevant to our search for political identity, ideological purpose, and revolutionary direction. We must continue the necessary debates and struggles over philosophical stands and theoretical formulation. Issue of race and class, nationalism and anti-authoritarianism, communism and capitalism. Wretched remains relevant and useful as we struggle to develop the theory and practice that will help to mobilize the majority of the peoples in opposition to those who now rule. It remains relevant to our efforts to construct new forms of international solidarity against rapacious international capital and to build free socialist societies, nations. Anybody have any questions before I move on to the next section? The nation, the people, state, and national culture. Anybody have any questions before I go to that? Guessing Joe doesn't have a question.
No, I don't have a question, but my groceries are on their way, so I'm going to be going in and out the door in a minute.
Anybody else want to come up and before I move on to the next section? Okay. All right. Well, we'll continue on. Okay. So 6A, the nation, the people, state, and national culture. 1, the nation is. 2, the nation and the people state, according to Fanon. 3, cultural, national, and revolutionary. 6A, the nation is. Thinking of how to open this section, the following seems a good enough hook. Europeans often forget that colonial peoples too are nations. V.I. Lenin, the character of Marxism and imperialist economism. We all think that we know what a nation is. However, some of us have forgotten, while others have never known. In either case, it boils down to allowing those who oppose our interests to tell us what to think, rather than aiding us in the process of learning how to think. As I look back now, I'm amazed to see how quickly and uncritically I accepted or rejected various definitions of nation and nationalism. I'm amazed at my failure to undertake an examination of the particular context, i.g., political, historical, out of which various definitions of nation arose. I'm amazed at my failure to seek to uncover the true purpose of those definitions were meant to serve. And at some point in the near future, after I complete several unfinished projects, I would like to take on rather a broad study and critique of nation and nationalism, focusing on the predominant bourgeoisie Eurocentric orientation that now passes as the only true, full, and legitimate point of view. I'd also, of course, pick up the development as best I could, some or all of the ideas contained throughout meditations, relative to our revolutionary future. This can't by the time I can, though, try to point out the way I can plant a few seeds. I think that I can provide a foundation for understanding of nation that I think we need to develop. Here we go. The nation clearly appears in one complete tributary societies, China, Egypt, where the tribute was centralized by the state, and the tributary class was a state class. In contrast to incomplete tributary societies like European feudal societies, where tribute collections was not centralized, and 2, capitalism, where the competition among capitals with the resulting equalization of profit and the mobility of labor are controlled by the state through legislations and monetary system and state economic policies. The European situation, the absence of nation during the feudal era, the concurrent birth of a nation in capitalism accounts for the West-centered distortion of the concept of nation. This distortion appears not only in the works of Stalin, but also in those of Marx, Engels, and Lenin. Why do we need a new understanding of nation and nationalism? We can't start on the low end with this example. Lenin also sometimes forgot that colonized people were nations, and at other times he remembered. Whether he forgot or remembered depended, I think, on his interest at the particular time that he found himself having to address the national question, the self-determination of nations, or related issues. I hesitate to say that Stalin forgot that the nation was because he was developing that often quoted so-called definition of nations. he was guided by the interests of the USSR, i.e., Russian Empire. Yet, yeah, Stalin's definition of nation is not truly objective or scientific. It was rather designed to help hold together the empire, to help develop a policy on the nationalities, i.e. nations, that would prevent them from seeking national independence and from possibly pursuing political and economic interests that would have come antagonistic to those of Russia. Now, moving a bit towards the high end, we need a new understanding of, a new and better grasp of, a new image, concept of nation and nationalism, because we have chosen and we can choose our new nationality and the content of its character right on. Moreover, we need to shape a new concept of nation and nationalism to help us understand what I mean when I say that everyone is a nationalist on one sort or another. The only question is, what kind of nationalist are you? I.e., bourgeoisie or revolutionary? In the closet, or generally arrogant, ignorant to the significance of your daily practice and choices. What goals do you pursue? Where do your loyalties lie? What kind of nation do you want to live in? Capitalist or socialist? I know there are those, black and white, who will quickly object to my characterization here. Stop and think a bit on the many ways that your thoughts and practice so often contradicts what may come out of your mouth about your not being a nationalist. Think about it. The next time you talk about our government or our country or bringing our boys troops home, and African and American nationalists is what far too many of you are, and color or race has nothing to do with it. If I'm sorry, buddy, if you're here and calling yourself an American, Black American, or white American, or an African American, you are doing what you are doing, if not proclaiming your nationality. Now, if you were an American revolutionary nationalist, we'd be on the same page. Most of you are American bourgeoisie nationalists. You support, even in your inactions, capitalism and its grape and plunder. Revolutionary nationalism, even in the American kind, would make one engage in struggles against capitalism and for socialism. What would be real anti-imperialism, real revolution? Far too many people still see everything in racialized terms, as we'll see again. Fanon's idea of the nation and revolutionary nationalism was not racially based, though the nation is a new unity, and because the racialized character of much of the contemporary national liberation socialist revolutionary struggles, it must be said that the new unity is not racial. It is not about uniting only with those who look like you, but it's a matter of uniting with those who think like you and who want what you want, who are willing to put their lives on the line while fighting to realize that the new world. While our enemies are wiping out population groups and destroying the planet in the name of profit, yeah, they want power too, but only to help them acquire the profits. Deep reflection on Fanon's thought, as particularly expressed in Wretched, has helped me to see that I can't limit my responsibility to say 5 of the states within present U.S. borders. The nation is all of us. It's everywhere. It's wherever we are, and our new concept of nation and nationalism must be linked to the reshaping of our ideas about the world. The world is and must be understood as our village. We need a world nation a new unity on an international scale. Most of the commonly propagated and accepted definitions of nation either omit or only superficially tell you what nation is, but say more about the kinds of clothes it wears. Most of us accept these politically loaded definitions without questioning the particular interests, biases, or theoretical handicaps of those who put them forward. Shared by these definitions is their placing of Europe and the rise of capitalism in Europe at their center. They hold that nation didn't exist until it appeared in Europe in 16th and 17th century, depending upon who's making the definition, who you read. Some of the more objective writers will, as we'll see below, almost at a passing point up the distinctions between modern nations and pre-modern nations. The point up the modern, I don't understand what he's saying, and point up, why not say point out? Point up the modern and the pre-modern uses of the very term nation, i.e., they will say that nation did in fact exist outside of Europe and prior to the rise of capitalism, but that these were primitive nations, etc. This line that no nations existed until they appeared in Europe with the concurrent rise of capitalism was a correlative line, which holds that non-European peoples did not have to make history until they were dragged into history, European, Western, or world. Another, you are so... Upon being discovered or colonized or otherwise conquered and exploited. I don't care who you are. You probably have a need to re-examine your present idea of the nation, of the nation. It's probably been influenced by some dictionary or encyclopedia which has served to confuse and mislead you. Let's check this composite dictionary encyclopedia definition of nation that I've drawn up to see what we find. Nation 1. Nation 1. From the Latin nato, birth, fr, natus, the pp of naci equals to be born, akin to the Latin, ginger, to beget. 2. A political organized nationality group, a community of people, a people having a common origin, traditions, language, customs, historical continuity, and social collective consciousness, possessing a common and defined and independent territory. 3. Modern meaning a group of people who have a sovereign government state. In a definition such as this, I think that the first and most important thing to reflect upon is the matter of birth, i.e., the bringing together of two or more heretofore separate entities, which then assume a new form. This is the nation. It is at its core, its essence, a new unity. Its form is new unity, that there arises the new nation, common origin, tradition, language, customs, historic, community, and social collective consciousness. It's said that nation means, or that a nation is a birth or a new birth. I prefer to call it a unity or a new unity. The nation means the nation is a new unity, a birth or a new birth as a result of combining distinct elements into a new whole. Unity or a new unity is a combination of elements, in this case, individuals and groups of peoples that come to form a complex systematic whole, a oneness in purpose and action. A nation is a new group unity and a new group identity. This new identity of the new group suppresses or supersedes previous separate identities, that they're based on locality, lineage, physical characteristics, etc. The nation is all inclusive. It's the peoples as a whole in their collective socio-political capacity. The nation is the new unity of previously separated groups, which now shares a common cause, a collective consciousness, and seeks to share collective mastery, responsibility for their social order. Share cultures, individuals, and groups profess loyalty to the nation new, unified collective with its new morality, values, and goals. Now, also, okay, hold on. Okay, we're getting there. Hold on a second. Let me look ahead. Okay, there's a stopping point there. Looks like there's a stopping point. Sorry, everybody. I'm having a hard time reading today, I guess. Okay. Now, also pay attention to the ways in which the modern meaning of nation, what a nation is, its contingent upon its having sovereign government and or state apparatus, which is to say, for example, that if today you're an independent nation, but you lose your independence tomorrow, then you thereby also lose your right to claim existence as a nation, and you become what? A colonized people, an enslaved people, a tribe or federation of tribes. Black people, they use the N-words. Black people, they use the N-words for black. Now let's check out the dictionary of philosophy, which was produced in Russia / the USSR. Nation and nationality. Nation, a historically formed community of people which succeed nationality. The nation is distinguished, first of all, by common material conditions of life, common territory and economic life, common language, and certain traits of common national character manifest in the unified national particularity of its culture. The nation comes into being with the appearance and development of the capitalist formation, liquidation of the feudal disunity, the consolidation of economic ties between regions within a country, the merging of local markets into a unified national market served as an economic basis for the formation of nations. Nationality, one of the forms of community of people which follows historically the clan and tribal community. It is formed in the period of the consolidation and merging of separate tribes of the replacement of the relations inherent in primitive communal societies, pre-Marxist, by those of private ownership and the emergence and development of classes. The formation of nationality is characterized by the changeover from blood relations to territorial communities, from the variety of tribal languages to a common language with a number of local dialects still in use. Each nationality receives a collective name, accumulates elements of common culture. Nationality exists both under slavery, the Egyptians, Grecian nationalities, and others, and feudalism, the old Russia, French nationalities, and others. The nation, a new historical form of a community of people, comes into being on the basis of developing capitalist relations. Since under capitalism, pre-capitalist relations still remain along with the capitalist ones. Not all nationalities grow into nations. As a rule, the consolidation of nationalities and their growth into nations are hindered, and the dependent countries oppressed by the monopoly capital of the imperialist countries. I must admit, when I first read the DOP definition of nations some years ago, it didn't occur to me that I should have risen my first question as soon as I finished the first sentence. How can you have a nationality before you have a nation? Maybe I'm just slow. However, it really seems that the elements used in the DOP definition of nation are essentially, fundamentally the same as those they use to describe the process of the formation of nationalities. Now, when the DOP definition of nation claims that they arose with the appearance of the capitalist formation, it appears that they only describe European social formations. This particularity European factor appears again in the DOP's definition of nationality, as it claims that some of them don't develop into nations. In the dependent countries oppressed by the monopoly capital of the imperialist countries, a posterior. They really tricked me off about the DOP definition of nationality, etc. Or is there projection of that tried periodization of modes of production, perpetuating and claiming in the process of Egypt was not only not a nation or an empire, but that it was characterized as a formation of the slave mode, meaning, among other things, that it wasn't as developed and civilized as those states of the feudal mode, like the old Russia and the French, i.e. the Europeans. Now let's check out Ernest Gilner, who, for many bourgeois scholars, is like the godfather of theoretical development of nationalism, speaking to the question, what is a nation? Here's what he says. 1. Two men are of the same nation if and only if they share the same culture, where culture means that a system of ideas and signs and associations and ways of behaving and communicating. 2. Two men are of the same nation if and only if they recognize each other as belonging to the same nation. Nations are an artificial products of men's convictions and loyalties and solidarities. A mere category of persons, say, occupants of a given territory or speakers of a given language, for example, becomes a nation if and when the members of the category firmly recognize certain mutual rights and duties to each other in virtue of their shared membership of it. It is their recognition of each other as fellows of this kind which turn them into a nation, and not the other shared attribute, whatever they might be, which separates that category from non-members. From here he conditions this definition on culture. He claims neither of two above are adequate because they are hooked, dependent, contingent upon culture and what it does. His definition of culture is hinged on his definition of literacy, i.e. the written word script, which must be universalized and standardized and incorporated the people as a whole. Thus he claims nation can only exist in industrial, i.e. capitalist societies. Mirzafa Horek, SON, holds nations are older than Gellner's modernist account allows. He also holds nations are large groups of people integrated by a combination of economic, political, history, religions, culture, and geography, relationships, and by the subjective perception of collective consciousness and of belonging together, a conception of equality of all members of the groups of as a civil society. And no matter what term people use to describe themselves, others, if they had these terms equivalent to that which is now called nation. O'Leary, son, note, nations are authentically felt expressions of collective identity. Here, Yaki paraphrases that in a part quotes of Honrock's paper, Real and Constructive, The Nature of a Nation, as well as Brandon Orlery and Ernest Gelliner's Diagnosis of Nationalism, a critical overview, or What is Living and What is Dead in Ernest Gallagher's Philosophy of Nationalism, in John H. Hale's Anthology, The State of the Nation, Ernest Geller, and the Theory of National Editors. That's weird. All right, here we go. Close this section with a quote from Stokely, and say, these are just weird notes. I think these are the incomplete stuff. What I've been implying here is not necessarily that the nation is what I say it is, but that it may in fact be so. Why is my voice less authoritative than Stalin's or Lenin's, or the guys that wrote the DOP or Gallagher's, or the folks that put the Webster or the Compton Encyclopedia together? The aim has been the aim has been to lay the ground, for example, Fanon's ideas of the nation, etc., and to lay some ground for our possible recognizing each other as members of the same nation, no matter color, but convictions. When I use the word Humpty Dumpty, said in a rather scornful tone, I mean just that, just what I chose it to mean, neither more nor less. The question is, said Alice, whether you can make, Jesus Christ, words mean or so many different things. The question is, said Humpty Dumpty, who is to be the master? That is all. That is all. Understanding that, the first need of freeing a people is to define their own terms. Another appeal. Don't know why they keep doing that to me. Stokely Carmichael. So, okay. All right, now we're going into something else. Sorry if that's a bit confusing to everybody. Let's see here. Trying to look for our next stopping point. I got 20 minutes. I don't know. And no, it doesn't look like there's another stopping point until long ahead. All right, cool. Hey, Mr. Carrot. Mr. Carrot Cake. 6A2. The nation of the people state, according to Fanon. Fanon knew the nation were a reality in the world prior to their appearance in Europe. He understood that nation exists on the African continent prior to their disruption by colonialism. Fanon understood that the difference between the qualitative character of the old pre-colonial nations and the nation that began their development in the course of anti-colonial struggle. The old nations never ceased to exist, though their development was arrested. The old nations were, in some cases, absorbed into large units as a manifestation of the new units that all nations are. The old nations were transformed. For Fanon, the new nations were expressed by the new collective consciousness, new set of social relations. The new nation were all inclusive and no longer based in racialism, tribalism, or regionalism. Sorry. For Fanon, the new nations were bounded by a common cause. They were shaped by common destinies, i.e., a destiny to skip the bourgeoisie phase, a national existence, and move straight ahead to socialism. Of course, we know that the capitalist regime, insofar as it is a way of life, cannot leave us free to perform our work at home, nor our duties in the world. Capitalist exploitation and cartels and monopolies are the enemies of the underdeveloped countries. On the other hand, the choice of a socialist regime, a regime which is completely oriented towards the people as a whole, and based on the principles that people are the most precious of all possessions, will allow us to go forward more quickly and more harmoniously, and thus make impossible that caricature of society where all economic and political powers is held in the hands of a few who regard the nation as a whole with scorn and contempt. Fanon understood that the new nation struggles to regain the recognition of their sovereignty, and that the newly exercised sovereignty would have to have characteristics suited to the new era and its demands. The very term sovereignty had now come to mean that the whole people would now exercise collective responsibility over all the nation's affairs, that the new state apparatus would truly be of, by, and for the people, and not exist separate from them nor stand above them. National liberation, national renaissance, and restoration of nationhood to the people, commonwealth, whatever may be the heading used for the formulas introduced, decolonization is always a violent phenomenon. At whatever level we study decolonization is quite simply the replacement of a certain species of men by another species of men. Without any period of transition, there is a total, complete, and absolute substitution. It is true that we could equally well stress the rise of a new nation, the setting up of a new state, but we have precisely chosen to speak of that kind of tabula rasa, which characterizes at the outset all decolonization. Its unusual importance is that it constitutes from the very first day the minimum demands of the colonized. To tell the truth, though, the proof of success lies in the whole social structure being changed from the bottom up. I have read the entire book several times before I realized that the title of the first chapter concerning violence tends to mislead. We weren't accustomed to think of violence as anything other than armed forms of struggle. So we get sidetracked by always a violent phenomenon line. Check it out. Here we are reading a chapter on violence, which most of us think of only in terms of armed or physical force. But how much does Fanon actually talk of arms and physical force? You might expect every page to contain some mention of knives, guns, armed encampments, guerrillas training in the forest, nightly raids on the farms of settlers, attacks on the local police station or military outposts. But how much of this is actually there in this first chapter on violence? Not much, you say. Well, why do you think that is? In most cases, colonial violence in armed physical forms is preceded by unarmed and non-physical forms of aggression in the guise of traders, academics, missionaries who seek not only to lay hold of the land and labor of the peoples, but also to lay hold of their minds, their customs, and their languages. These violent actions serve to suppress, distort, injure, frustrate, infringe, profane, and unduly alter the targeted peoples and their social orders, and cripple the people's ability to resist and to regain their independence. Yeah, Fanon is talking about violence, but we need to refocus. He's not simply talking about picking up the gun. He's talking about the kind of violence that requires that you change your mind. He's talking about the atmosphere of violence that should come to prevail within oppressed communities, such that individualism is the first to disappear. Do you recall that line? Individual experience, because it is national, and because it is a link in the chain of national existence, cease to be individual. Here we go. We're going to read something. As soon as the native begins to pull on his moorings and to cause anxiety to the settler, he is handed over to well-meaning souls who, in cultural congresses, point out to him the specificity and wealth of the Western values. But every time Western values are mentioned, they produce in the native a sort of stiffening or muscle lockjaw. During the muscular lockjaw, during the period of decolonization, the native's reason is appealed to. He is offered definite values. He is told frequently that decolonization need not mean regression, and that he must put his trust in qualities which are well tried, solid, and highly esteemed. But it so happens that when the native hears a speech about Western culture, he pulls out his knife, or at least he makes sure it is within reach. The violence with which the supremacy of white values is affirmed, and the aggressiveness which has permeated the victory of these values over the ways of life and thought of the native means that in revenge, the native laughs in mockery when Western values are mentioned in front of him. In the colonial context of settlers, only ends his words of breaking in the native when the latter admits loudly and intelligibly the supremacy of the white man's value. In the period of decolonization, the colonized masses mock at these very values, insult them, and vomit them out. Where was that at? Oh, there it is. Yeah. Chapter 1. Oh, wait, no. Yeah. Fanon talks about the need.
So it's about the little I and the big we.
Hold on. It's not like you're mad at me. What are you talking about?
That's where you're at.
The little I.
It's about the little I and the big we.
I don't see the little I and the big we. Could you read the sentence?
Before. It's about the little I and the big we. It's not me and mine, but us and ours.
Okay, thank you. Dude, where does the fuck does this one go to? Hold on a second. Huh. Maybe I read two of them. Okay. It's about the little I and the big we. It's not about me and mine. It's about us and ours. The violence which has ruled over the ordering of the colonial world, which has ceaselessly drummed the rhythm of the destruction of native social forms, and broken up without reserve the systems of reference of the economy, the customs of dress, and the external life. That same violence will be claimed and taken over by the native at the moment when deciding to embody history in his or her own persons. He or her surges into the forbidden quarters. All right, let's find out here. Trying to figure out a stopping point. You find one? You see one?
I don't know, here.
Let me see her. Because they talk about forbidden quarters down below. The next thing it says here is like, prior to the experience of writing these reflections, I would read that passage and focus only on the line "surge into a forbidden quarters." It's part of that part. It looks like.
The next page.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, good idea. Prior to the experience of writing these reflections, I would read that passage and focus only on the lines "surge into forbidden quarters." My focus was on the narrow forms of violence. I was wrapped up in my own riot stage. Aside from not being able to understand violence from a revolutionary standpoint, I was clearly unable to grasp what it means to embody history, a subject we'll have to take up below. All right, we'll stop there. Page 373. And let's see how much more we have left. All right. Let me look. I think we have enough to go over for tomorrow. Yeah, we got tons more to go. Almost done, everybody, with this book. Just looking ahead. Oh, yeah. We'll be done soon. Okay. So, 398. Yeah, we got time. All right. Okay. Hello. People are welcome to come up, have the conversation, ask the questions. Don't know where Dooley's at. Don't know why they stopped coming into the readings. Hope they're okay. Joe, do you have anything you would like to say?
It was a very good read. It taught me something about nationalism that I didn't know. That there was a type of nationalism, revolutionary nationalism.
What's the different distinctions between one type of nationalism and another type of nationalism? Do you remember?
The word in front of it.
Which word?
Like revolutionary nationalism, bourgeoisie nationalism.
What different characters did they bring on?
Well, like revolutionary nationalism brought on revolutionary character, and bourgeoisie nationalism brought on bourgeoisie nationalism.
But what is the defining thing? I think it's one's based in exploitation, and that the dominant classes are the nation, and it subjugates other people within that nation. The other one is bringing everybody into relations with one another and seeking out a socialist revolution that's based on everybody. I think those are the different characteristics that we're talking about. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. No worries. Sorry, been busy. Haven't been able to catch the Discord readings. No worries. It's okay. Yeah, so like the one thing too is nationalism needs to turn into an international character. It needs to transform in from a nationalist perspective to an international perspective. And it seems like that the character of a national liberation is based on a colonial being colonized or and stuff like that. So we are a colony here in the United States. So nationalism is going to be needed, I think, in this context, because we maintain colonies now because we're a white settler colony. Anybody else have anything to say? Like to say anything before I close it? I can agree. Sweet, thank you. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Oh, antiquity coming up. All right, let's get what up?
Hello. Sorry, I was not expecting you to do that like that. Hello. Sorry.
No worries. Do you have any other questions? You have a question?
No, I just thought it was a very interesting reading. I'm kind of catching up a little bit later into this, but like, I think that with bourgeoisie revolution, if I'm not mistaken, is just like very destructive upon itself and seeks to like restrict people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like white nationalism is basically an isolation of a certain demographic of group and excluding other demographics of groups. They're talking about revolutionary nationalism, like what Joe said, is what the hell? Decline. Is the character... Crap, I just got like... I lost it. I lost it because something happened. Something happened just now, like a thing popped up and then the thing went out. It's gone. It's gone. But the revolution, I got it. The revolutionary nationalism involves everybody to be involved, right?
Yep.
The distinctions, like the character of like what we want as a society. You know what I mean? It should be inclusive, not exclusive. So bourgeoisie nationalism seems to be exclusive.
Yeah, very much so. I think from any like bourgeoisie revolutions or revolutions we've seen in history, they tend to be very exclusive of the majority and be only inclusive to the ruling class.
Yeah.
And if a bourgeoisie is to say have a revolution against another bourgeoisie, it's not including other people; it's excluding people to make different people included into the hierarchy.
Yeah. Now there are many things you can draw from. So what you need to do is we need to draw people in to be able to go and ask their own questions. What is the national question in the United States? Is it pertinent to us now? Why is it pertinent? Why is it not? What is the character? If we do a national liberation, what is the character that brings it to being a international character? So like these things need to be answered and questioned by you personally.
Yeah.
Like anybody should go and discover these things and figure out what their position is on this. And then when you figure out your position, come talk to some people that also have different positions within the national liberation struggle and have the conversation. That's how we're going to determine whether these ideas can be put into practice. We have to go thoroughly through these things to understand not only is this a condition in our material condition that is something that's going to need had, and why. That's something for us to engage in with each other and through our material conditions, what we observe. Or how else are we going to know answers to questions if we not do those things?
We won't know the answers at all. And then, like, the ability to ask questions, I think is a very important skill and ability to have for everyone.
I agree.
That's not to say, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's not to say you need to be educated in every single discipline of whatever you can think of, but to be able to ask questions and learn from other people where people have some strengths, some weaknesses is a really important thing.
That's why I always like with anybody find some comrades in your area. You don't have to go out because Joe didn't have to go out all that much. You know what I mean? Yeah. They didn't have to go out all that much, but they're still part of groups, even though they're bedridden. So like, I that's why I ask people to go into organization to understand, because good organizations are going to have political education. They're going to have primary text to hit on, and also your own studies. So that's why it's important to like find groups like this, because I'm being part of like the group that I'm part of. I'm learning more because they're giving me tasks. Like one of our tasks is to read on practice and on contradiction. But after we read it, study it, take notes, we come together and talk about what positions we brought up, what things we disagree with, and have those conversations. Even if you're incorrect and you have this position, the point is that when you're amongst comrades and you're doing these things and these studies, that a struggle is necessary to bring out ideological lines and understandings and to be able to utilize these things in practical use. That's why it's important for us to be collective with one another so that we can do these things.
I also think that we need to push away from, like, if you ask a question or if you answer something wrong, being like, I'm not sure what the word is, but like denounced for like that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we need to push away from that and accept that you are allowed to think and be wrong, and that's okay. But it's important to learn from that mistake.
Mm-hmm. The point is too, and that's why I fear on TikTok. Like, it's better. You can't do this on TikTok because so many people do reactionary responses instead of observing and seeing if this person that's asking a question that might be backward thinking. We need to address the fact is, how are they taking the information after being shown wrong? Because because you're right, one of the principles of white supremacy is trying to be perfect. Try not to be wrong. You don't want to be wrong. You don't want to not know things. Those are principles of white supremacy and hyper-individualism, because then you're just left in your own thought process instead of actually engaging with other people into your backwards thinking, because we need to understand that people come from backward situations and they're going to have, especially if they're illiterate and have literacy problems and stuff, they're going to have questions that we might like take double takes on, but we need to address how they're taking the feedback, if they're critically taking it and actually absorbing and growing from that. That's going to happen. I'm probably going to find out that I disagree. Like, for instance, one of my comrades doesn't agree. Well, this is just for pretensies. Like communalism. Communalism was a thing by Huey P. Newton. Some comrades disagree with communalism. Other comrades agree with it. But to find out if it's important and if we can establish it here and if it's significant, we have to go into these discussions and draw the hard questions, to actually go through it thoroughly and to figure out if it works or not, if it's universal or not.
Mm-hmm. And even in an implementation phase, that it's okay for there to be mistakes because we are not perfect. And we shouldn't be perfect. That's just wrong.
Exactly. All right.
Those
Joe,
are my thoughts.
No, that's good.
Thank
it. You and Joe, thank you, because this helps me to come up to a higher conversation and talk more about it. The more people that actually participate in this, and I thank Joe, because Joe has putting their vulnerability up here constantly. It's good, because then we can have a more in-depth conversation about the material we read. Yes. All right, Joe, do you have anything to say before I close?
No, I'm good. I'm saying thank you.
No worries. What about you? Anything else before I close, Antiquity?
I think that those are my thoughts that I've gathered from this conversation.
Yeah. Real quick, does anybody have any questions before I close in the comments? And I have to do another appeal. Let's say something else.
The amount of appeals.
Yeah. All right. Doesn't look like anybody has any questions on here. I'll go ahead and close it out. I appreciate everybody for coming up. We'll finish this book maybe tomorrow and start a new one. Another Frantz Fanon book. All right. Thank you, Antiquity, for coming up. I appreciate it. This is a pleasure.